John chapter 13, verses 34 through 35. Give you a moment to find it if you'd like to read along. I'm going to be reading from the Message translation. And it reads, "Let me give you a new command. Love one another. In the same way I loved you, you love one another. This is how everyone will recognize that you are my disciples, when they see the love you have for each other." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Okay, am I still in Jackson or did I make it to heaven yet? I just wanted to check. I always love coming to Wells because your music is amazing. I don't even know if you appreciate how amazing it is. It always is. Every time. Well, it's my great honor and privilege to be here. As Jill stated, I am the conference lay leader for the Mississippi Annual Conference. It is not a paid job. Some people think it is. It's a volunteer job. But honestly, it's my favorite job of all the jobs that I have. So I'm really happy to be here in that capacity and to be in this great church where the music's always great, where the love is always strong, as Lloyd indicated by his great spirit of gratefulness, and that you would even have him leading part of the service and sharing the kind of environment and the atmosphere that you've created in this church. It's just wonderful to be here. So John 13, 34 through 35, I'm going to kind of speak from the title of They'll Know. In John 13, if you probably heard a pastor or a Bible study teacher teach that the book of John was written for the purpose of getting people to believe. The book of John was written to convince people that Jesus is who he says he is. And so in John 13, this is where the author of John writes about the Last Supper. Jesus and the disciples are sitting down, and they've eaten their last meal. They've broken bread together, and Jesus is about to wash their feet, and he has to convince them, oh, no, I do have to wash your feet. We don't want you to wash our feet, Lord. But he needs to wash their feet because he needs to show them love and action. He needs to show them what they need to be doing once he's no longer with them, and he tells them he's no longer going to be with them, and they talk about Judas. Judas's betrayal. Judas is identified as the person who's going to betray him. And then he kind of has a teaching moment. And to me, this is perhaps the most important verse in the Gospel of John. We have the Great Commission, but Jesus is kind of giving them the foundation of the Great Commission right here. When he says, let me give you a new command. You got to love one another. Not just any kind of way, but the same way that I loved you, right? Because we like to interpret Scripture different ways, and we might interpret love a lot of different ways. But he said, I want you to do it the way I did it, the way I loved you. And this is important because this is going to be our trademark. This is going to be how everybody will know that you are my followers. This is going to be how everybody's going to know that you are my disciples when they see the love that you have for each other. It's interesting because when I look at statistics as a conference lay leader and some other capacities that I hold, and you see numbers going down and you wonder why. And so I like to look at other areas. So I've read some articles on businesses. So one I read was, how do you keep turnover down, right? How do you keep people from leaving? How do you keep people in an organization? And so Forbes wrote an article, and they gave 5 ways. One of the ways was to give praise, to lift people up, to say good things to people. And they explained that when people feel respected, when they feel acknowledged, when they feel desired, they're more likely to stay. And so I think Jesus was teaching this is the way to draw people in. This is the way to draw people into me, to share with them love the way that I've shown love with you. And in absolute truth, the universal principle not only works inside the church, it works outside the church. So what that says to me is even Forbes knows what Jesus knows, which is that love draws, and from that love we can grow and draw others. There was this young man that I knew, and he was extremely good at showing love and understanding this John 13, 34 through 35, and his name was Keith Tonkel. We came to this church. My mother came this morning with me, and my mother, my father, and we came to this church probably 25 years ago. All of my life, we watched the Methodist Hour. So all of my life, my mom taught Sunday school, and she would catch Keith Tonkel. We'd be sitting at that breakfast table, and she would catch Keith Tonkel to see what he's going to say before she taught Sunday school, because she takes Sunday school teaching very seriously. So we came to visit Wells one morning, and Keith met us. He shook our hands, and my maiden name is Red, so we were the Red family. And so when he started to recognize visitors, he said, and we thank the Green family for joining us this morning. But y'all, let me tell you, Keith's uncle was such a superhero in this house, it didn't matter what he said. We were thrilled. Keith's uncle recognized us. And, Keith's uncle, I was so fortunate. I would say my second favorite job was to get to work on the United Methodist Hour starting in 2010 with Keith and with Steve. And it was, I'm not a celebrity shock kind of person. I've run into a couple people in New York City and different places, and it's like, okay, that's so-and-so, that's kind of neat. But the first time I saw Keith's uncle, like we were about to tape a show together, I was like, wow. Hey, baby. How you doing? How's your husband doing? But he is exactly who he appears to be. He was exactly who you thought he was. And if anybody I ever knew could make you feel loved, genuinely loved and accepted exactly how you are, Keith's uncle was that man. And to the day that he died, I consider him a human superhero. Way back when, he was one of 28 white Methodist ministers who signed a statement condemning segregation and racism in the Deep South in 1963. 6 years later, he would become the pastor of Wells United Methodist Church, and I still don't know how he pulled off a 40-some-year consecutive appointment. I should have found that out when I had the chance. But from what I understand, he came to an aging, dwindling congregation in a working-class neighborhood that was shifting from white to black. That was no easy challenge. And it is a congregation that I know from experience, having come multiple times, and that other people know as one of the most loving, most accepting congregations, just as Lloyd described, one of the most inclusive congregations I've ever seen, particularly in the state of Mississippi. And that is part of the legacy of Keith uncle and his love. Because if you've been to other congregations tend to, and tell me if I'm wrong, Reverend Moore, congregations tend to take on the personality of their pastor. You can tell how the pastor is based on the atmosphere of the church. And so Wells has benefited greatly from Keith uncle. But fortunately, you'll be getting Chris Cumbus next week, and I know some of you have met him. And he shares a similar love for love of people. I was really impressed by something he did at annual conference. Now, I knew him before annual conference, and he and my husband go to lunch often, and they love each other. My husband tells me about him, and his wife, Sheila Cumbus, was one of my pastors at Christ, where I'm a member. But Chris Cumbus, he was the pastor of Crossgate's First United Methodist Church in Brandon, a kind of maybe upper middle class white neighborhood, white church. And then he moved to Shiloh, a little more rural, but somewhat similar, United Methodist Church in Brandon. Well, Little Zion United Methodist Church, a really small African-American church in Pelahatchie, found themselves without a pastor in the middle of the year. And Chris Cumbus accepted the call to fill in there as their pastor till the district superintendent found another pastor. And he fell in love with those people, and they fell in love with him. I wish you could hear the people at that church talk about what Chris Cumbus has done for them and how valued they feel and how loved they feel because of him and because of the way that he has been with him. And at annual conference, the thing that I mentioned that impressed me about him, he went to the microphone several times, and every time he did, he would say, Chris Cumbus, pastor of Little Zion United Methodist Church and Shiloh United Methodist Church. See, y'all don't know little things like that to be mentioned first when you're an extremely small African-American church, and this man is pastoring this large white United Methodist Church, but he mentions you first. That is thoughtful, intentional love. I just anticipate he will do great things with the wonderful, loving congregation of Wells United Methodist Church. So, I mentioned the legend. I mentioned what will hopefully be an incoming legend. But you know what? The real playmakers in the United Methodist Church, the lay people. Paragraph 127 of the Book of Discipline says, it's called the ministry of the laity. I like this paragraph a lot. It says, the ministry of the laity flows from a commitment to Christ's outreaching love. Lay members of the United Methodist Church are, by history and calling, active advocates of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Every lay person is called to carry out the Great Commission, Matthew 28:18 through 20. Every lay person is called to be missional. Now catch this last sentence. The witness of the laity. Their Christ-like examples of everyday living, as well as the sharing of their own faith experiences of the gospel, is the primary evangelistic ministry through which all people will come to know Christ, and the United Methodist Church will fulfill its mission, the ministry of the laity. Love is the fuel of the church. It says that our ministry flows from Christ's outreaching love. It says that lay members of the United Methodist Church are active advocates by history and by calling. Part of Wells' legacy is the active nature of the church. There's a gentleman at my husband's church now. His name is Richard Gibson. My husband pastors Mountain Ridge United Methodist Church, and he talks about how Keith Tonkel and some of the men from this church reached out to him when he lived near the church and showed him the love of Christ. He did not become a member of Wells, but he is now the lay delegate to annual conference and has been for a long time at Mountain Ridge United Methodist Church because of a seed that Wells planted in him almost 40 years ago. It's our witness. It's our examples. It's our sharing of our own faith experiences that the United Methodist Church says is going to fulfill the mission to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. I want to just point out to you, I'm trying to wrap up. I told James, Heather told me you all like a 10-minute sermon, and I'm at that point, and he told me, he said, well, I won't tell you what he told me, but he said, you haven't gotten that desire met often, so I was trying to do it today. I'm at 10 minutes, but I'm going to wrap up in a couple minutes. I'm gonna wrap up in a couple minutes. So I just wanted to let you know that I was on the selection committee that selected Ashley Rogers as the 2018 recipient of the Harry Denman Award. Is she in here? Okay. The Harry Denman Evangelism Award honors United Methodists in each annual conference whose exceptional ministry of evangelism in word, sign, and deed brings people into a transforming life relationship with Christ. This is an award that's given out in every annual conference all over our church every year. And Ashley Rogers got that award for the layperson last year. I just want to share a couple things that Heather Hensling wrote about her. She has exercised a deep understanding in the various means of grace in her work with students in the public schools of Jackson, Mississippi, and the children in the urban core location of her church, Wells Memorial. Most of the children living in Wells' neighborhood are unchurched by traditional definitions, but they are drawn to Wells by what I can only describe as the prevailing grace and love that they witness and experience in Miss Ashley. She goes on to say, the children and youth at Wells come from a variety of social, financial, and cultural backgrounds. There are students who attend private schools, public schools, homeschool students. There are at least 4 racial ethnic backgrounds presented. She moves with ease, working with the students and their parents and guardians, treating everyone the same. She speaks the truth as she understands it in love. I watch her in ministry around the church and the community and see her speaking with as much love and regard to those whose opinions differ from her own as she does with those who share her views. Wow. And that was a tiny bit of what was written about her. So much love in that application. It made me think when I read that application, what can my pastor write about me? When we hear paragraph 127 about the ministry of the laity, it should prompt us to ask ourselves questions. What actions have I intentionally taken to show the love of Christ in my church and beyond my church? Have I been a Christ-like example in my everyday living? Have I shared my own faith experiences of the gospel? Am I making sure God's church fulfills its mission? If not, why not? And what can I change to do these things better than I have been? Some lay people become distracted in fulfilling our calling to lay ministry because there's a pastoral change, because there's an internal skirmish or external skirmish, right? Disagreements within or beyond the church. I will leave you with John 14:1, which says, don't let this throw you. After Jesus finished talking to the disciples, I'm leaving, there was going to be a skirmish around them. Don't let this throw you, he said. You trust God, don't you? Trust me. Right now, we got to trust God. We got to trust Jesus. I trust that you all are going to strongly continue the legacy of love that Keith left here, and that you're going to partner with Chris Cumbus, and that no matter who the pastor is, you're going to accept your responsibility as lay people, because we are the ones who fulfill the Great Commission. Will you, the laity of Wales, who will make up Wales as pastors come and go, will you commit to continue and enlarge that legacy? Thank you.